Thank you everyone for joining us for the Landing Your First Academic EM Faculty Position, What Chairs Want You to Know webinar. We've got four heavy hitters, chairs around the country here, joining us to share their wisdom. I'll briefly go over a few of our panelists. So firstly, Dr. Mary Tansky. She's a professor and chair of the Department of Emergency Medicine at Oregon Health and Science University. She received her undergrad degree in business management with a specialization in health and humanities at Michigan State. And then she attended medical school at Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan, and completed her EM residency at George Washington University in DC. There, she was also chief resident. She joined Oregon Health and Science as an emergency medicine admin fellow and completed her master's in business administration in the OHSU Healthcare MBA program. And then she joined OHSU as faculty as medical director of operations and director of the ED observation unit. She's co-director of the Emergency Medicine Administration Fellowship and teaches the Operations and Quality Management course in the Healthcare MBA program. Her professional interests include emergency department operations, healthcare quality, mentorship, and leadership development. And she loves spending time with her husband and 7-year-old twins, traveling, running, and reading. Thanks so much, Dr. Tansky, for joining us.
Thank
In
you.
addition, we have Dr. Stern, who's the head of the Department of Emergency Medicine that includes Harborview and University of Washington Medical Center emergency departments. She's also an active researcher in the area of resuscitation science, specifically evaluating novel therapeutic strategies in the early phases following traumatic injury with hemorrhagic shock. She earned her bachelor's degree from Tufts and her MD from Case Western Reserve University and completed her residency in emergency medicine at the University of Cincinnati, followed by a research fellowship in resuscitation science. After 17 years as faculty at the University of Michigan, she moved to the University of Washington in 2009 to lead the Department of Emergency Medicine, where she is currently. Thank you, Dr. Stern, for joining us.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Jared. I'm coming from Rutgers University in the emergency department over at University Hospital and New Jersey Medical School. So I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. James Waymack. He's the current chair of emergency medicine at Southern Illinois University in the Department of Emergency Medicine. He completed his undergrad at Western Illinois University and his medical education residency at Southern Illinois University. His professional interests in emergency medicine include clinical and diagnostic imaging, rural emergency medicine, tactical medicine, as well as disaster preparedness. So, Dr. Waymack, thank you for joining us. And then finally, Dr. Nelson, my former chair. He is the Dean and Chair of Health Affairs and Professor of Emergency Medicine and Medical Toxicology at the Charles E. Schmidt College of Medicine at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, Florida. Prior to this, he was the chair of the Department of Emergency Medicine at Rutgers New Jersey Medical School in Newark, New Jersey. Additionally, he is board certified in emergency medicine, medical toxicology, and addiction medicine. Thank you, Dr. Nelson, for joining us.
Wonderful. And I forgot to introduce myself. My name's Indrani Guzman Das. I'm a PGY2 at the Stanford Healthcare Emergency Medicine Residency in California. So we'll go ahead. Jared and I have lined up a few questions that we have for our wonderful panelists. But if anybody in the audience has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and then we'll pivot to you as well as time allows. So the first question we have, and I think we can go just in order of how we introduced folks. So Dr. Tansky, if you don't mind starting with this one, is, when we think about creating a standout application, beyond the CV, what do you look for when you think, oh, this faculty application really stands out to me?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So we tend to get quite a few applications for positions at our center. And of course, we only have so many specific spots. And so things that I look for are how authentic they come through. So are people really pursuing a path for a reason? So why do they want to go into academics? What is it that really makes them excited to come to work and to actually pursue emergency medicine as a career as opposed to just a job? And I think personal statements and cover letters can really help with that. Once you look at CVs, many of them, people are coming right out of residency, so they tend to have a lot of similarities. Everyone has a course through undergrad and medical school and residency, but a cover letter can tell the person that's reading it really what makes them tick, what makes them shine, and also what they would contribute to your institution and department. And so if you can utilize that to, make yourself stand out, I think that's great. So things that are personal, things that, you have done and contributed, and then what your future goals are and how you think that you would be able to enhance the faculty, the residency, the program. Those are all things that I like to look for.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that is really helpful as people think about the other components of their application to really highlight some of their achievements. Jared, do you want to ask the next question?
Sure. So, Dr. Stern, we'll go with you. So, when it comes to the culture, growth, and long-term success of applicants, when finding the right fit within the departmental culture and the needs of your department, how can applicants effectively demonstrate alignment with your department's mission during the interview process while still coming across as authentic? So, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. That's also a great question. Although I will tell you, when I read the question, I sort of thought to myself, I hope that people are coming to these job applications or these interviews and looking at places where it is authentic. Because if they're not being authentic, they're compromising themselves in a way that they're not looking at the right jobs, right? So I guess when I look at an applicant, it's about their fit for us, but it's also about our fit for them. From my perspective, and when I came here, we had 12 faculty. We now have 100. So I've done a lot of interviewing and a lot of hiring. And from my perspective, one of the most important things that you can do is you get the right people on the bus, which is, as you said, people that are aligned with the mission, the vision, and, the strategic planning of the department and have a passion in those areas. At the same time, these are the best and the brightest. These are wonderful individuals. I don't want to bring somebody on if I don't think that that we're a fit for them. Like the interest isn't there, or I don't have the mentorship to mentor them in their area. So I would say first and foremost to the applicants, you know, it's about do some homework to see what the mission is, see what the vision of the place is, and make sure that place seems right to you. You'll get a better sense of that when you interview and when you ask a lot of questions. I think some of this it's not just about the interview process, it's about the CV as well. And Dr. Tansky talked about this to some extent, but your CV should tell a story about you and your passion along with the cover letter. And so I look for that match. I look for, well, if you're going to tell me, you have this special interest in QA/QI because you know that we might have an opening in QA/QI, but you haven't done anything in QA/QI, that's kind of a red flag. I'd want to know why. So, I think the most important thing, and that's why I read this question and I thought, I think the most important thing is for you to be authentic in the interview. As soon as you're not, it will come across. So be authentic, go to the interviews with curiosity, ask lots of questions, and that would be my recommendation. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what I would say.
No, absolutely. That answers the question wonderfully. Thank you so much. And then to follow up on that, I guess in the same vein, Dr. Waymack, how would you assess whether or not it would be a good cultural fit for your department with this incoming candidate? And how would you feel that the candidates should evaluate the department's culture during the interview? Do you feel that there's a way for them to ask these questions? Like, should they be subtle with it or kind of just come out and say, you know, what kind of culture do you have and will I blend with it?
Sure. Well, I think Dr. Tansky and Dr. Stern already hit on some good points there. How do you assess the cultural fit? I think a lot of that comes through observation. And a lot of times it's the smaller things, the other interactions with our staff or our faculty members. The way we generally structure our interviews, you'll have your formal interviews with myself and maybe other faculty members within that division. But we also offer some more informal times where you can maybe get a sense of that cultural fit. And that might be, a dinner with other faculty members that are not part of the interview team or process or constructing that rubric that will be part of the final decision. And so hopefully that gives the applicant a little more comfort in asking maybe some of those more difficult questions that might not be as subtle coming off. But I think it's okay for the applicant to ask those as well of us. I would hope that they would do that. Other ways that we might look at this, depending on what the position is, it might be, interacting with the residents as well, or maybe our students, if that's part of that curricular day going on, or giving a grand rounds or a lecture, attending a faculty meeting. There's a lot of different ways we can work through that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for sharing that insight. Along those lines, Dr. Nelson, if you don't mind commenting, and Dr. Waymack touched on this, but let's say, you have someone who's deemed the culture to be the perfect fit for them, but there are no open positions in the department at the time. How do you recommend that applicants stay on their radar of, potential job openings in the future? And is there anything that they can do to increase their chances of getting a call when a position opens up?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's tricky. You need to be able to straddle kind of subtly keeping in touch with the program or the department without overwhelming them with inquiries. Certainly, if you know that they have, it depends a little bit on where you are. Like if it's a nearby program, it probably is worth learning about what events they're having. Do they have grand rounds? Do they have other things that are open to the public and making an appearance now and again? Obviously, you're not going to do that if it's distant. If anything in your life changes, if you get a new certificate or degree, if you are thinking about changing jobs, if your job changes where you currently are, it might be okay to reach out to let them know that something's better or different about you. I don't think pinging them on a monthly basis is going to be very helpful. If you're going to contact them, you're probably going to be done more on a semi-annual basis, every couple of months, you might reach back. Obviously, keep your eyes peeled to things like LinkedIn, social media, other areas, see if things are opened up. In general, I think you're expecting me to remember to reach out to you is not a great way to manage that. As much as I might like the candidate, there's just so many things going on. So being visible and periodically reappearing is a good thing. But again, it's a really delicate balance. Also knowing what they need and making sure that you'd be somebody that they would benefit from. So the balance of benefit is probably tilted towards them so that you might become a little bit more memorable, might be okay, and try to know what they would value. But I'll say it for a third time, it's definitely tricky, and I'd be very careful as you approach that issue.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nelson. And a follow-up question for you and anyone who can comment on this as well. But how do you best assess or recommend to an applicant ways to find out what is most valuable to a department? Is it just through word of mouth, or are there particular resources or ways to analyze a department website that you think might be most useful?
I'll throw out a quick answer, and I would love to hear what other people think, but it is a bit of detective work, partly speaking to people in the department, people in nearby departments, trolling social media a little bit to see what the department is interested in. Many of us can assess a department based on what divisions they have, what fellowships they have, what sorts of research they're doing, and you can kind of get a sense of what that department is interested in. But I will say that where it gets again tricky is that just because they have a lot of something doesn't mean they want more of it. And sometimes if they don't have something, might actually be looking for it. So it's tough. But it's probably the best way to do it is going to be doing your homework and speaking to people.
Thank you so much. Dr. Tansky, I think you had raised your hand for this one as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to contribute to this one too. So the way that I think of this is, we're always recruiting. We're not always hiring, but we're always recruiting. And so I really do welcome the touch points. We have a team of people that, help screen applications across our 5 sites. And I do appreciate when people kind of check in every 6 months or so. But also what's worked well is if people have said, hey, do you want to grab coffee at SAEM, or at a conference? That's been really great. Or if they purposely seek out, abstracts or presentations that my team is doing, many of us tend to be there. And there's always that social time at the end where people can come and say, hey, I noticed that you're doing this work, or your administrative team is doing this, your education team is doing this. That is excellent. I feel like that's a very proactive way to start building relationships. Doesn't always have to be with me as the chair. It can also be with our people and our team. And I've had some people who have built these relationships across the country and then ultimately have come to us as faculty. And that's really cool and exciting. So I think that if you're interested in a specific topic and you know that the group is active in that realm someplace, those relationships can be super helpful for future career jobs. And then to Lewis's second point, a lot of times the faculty will know if there's an area where you're trying to bolster, right? So if you don't have a wilderness fellowship, for example, and you have this as a specialty, that's something that you can offer as a big benefit to the department, your expertise. And many times chairs get excited about that because our job is to look for opportunities to grow and to bring things into our department that'll benefit our faculty, our residents, our patients. And so that can be a really cool, exciting opportunity and a way to I don't want to say market yourself, but really just show that value of something that you're interested in that you can bring that's new and different.
Thank you so much. I think that's a really salient point of finding ways that departments want to grow and also highlighting what a great opportunity conferences like SAEM are to broaden your network and find these opportunities. Dr. Waymack, do you have a comment on this question as well?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Dr. Tansky said, I would recommend going to the conferences if you have some places that you're very interested in, or you might not have had that opportunity because there's not a position open at that time. Having a people list of the 5 folks that you want to catch in the hallway at one of these national conferences is a great thing to do. And even if it's a quick 5 minutes, refreshing that face, saying hello, I think goes a long way. And then to follow up on Dr. Nelson's other point, one thing that changed in my time now as chair at SIU, we post the job description with the position. We had not done that in the past, but a lot of times the job description hopefully should articulate more so than maybe some forward facing information on the department's website about specifically what this position, what the department is looking for with that, and might give you more insight to bring to the interview.
That's a really helpful point. Thank you so much, Dr. Waymack. And Dr. Stern, any additional comments?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Dr. Tansky and Dr. Waymack just said. Sometimes we have a general job description, but more often we have a very specific job description or somewhat specific. So look at that closely. The other thing that I would say is I agree with Dr. Nelson, don't call back every month. However, I often tell candidates that we all know that, especially if you have a large number of faculty, opening, our needs ebbs and flow with regard to hiring. And so I often tell people, you know what, we don't have an opening right now, but we may in 6 months. Please feel free to call back, to email back. And we keep, I have a spreadsheet of all the applicants for each year and their cover letters and their CVs. So I always have that. And so I agree, not every month, but I encourage people to call back. And then the other thing I would say is, University of Washington and OHSU kind of are in a unique position in that you're the only academic place in town and the only residency in town and in that area. So if someone is in the region and they reach out, and not because we want to get free labor or anything, but if you can develop collaborative relationships, if you're in that area and you can develop collaborative relationships with some of the faculty there or occasionally teach medical students or something like that's another way to sort of keep your foot in the door. But I think, a lot of this often comes down to, demonstrating, as I think Dr. Nelson said, you're on making sure that you're demonstrating your ongoing development and continuing to focus on that so that when you come back, you're not just saying, I'm still here, but maybe you're saying, I'm still here and this is what I've done, so that you're bringing something more to the table.
Thank you so much for highlighting that and the importance of keeping your ear to the ground and maintaining and building relationships continuously. It sounds like 6 months might be the touch point sweet spot and definitely avoiding the 1 month, as Dr. Nelson described earlier.
Yeah, so and in going off of that, how we talked about the need to, find the right fit within the culture and within the department. And I'll kind of open this up because I think at this point, we've lost the going to each one. So I'll just open it up. How critical do you feel the specific fellowships are for particular roles in the department? I think amongst residents now, I think there's a feeling that if you want to work in academics, you have to go towards a fellowship. You have a medical education if you want to go into a residency leadership, or administrative fellowship if you want to go into a medical director role. So how strongly do you feel that it's critical to have fellowships in these roles? And if you find that if an applicant finds that they're unable to attain these roles, should they go and find a fellowship that might set a niche for them?
I'm happy to start, but I'm sure my colleagues here have probably better answers than me, but I'm happy to throw out some thoughts on that. So I, on a yearly basis, will talk to our residents about academic jobs. And one of the things that I emphasize to them is one academic job doesn't look like another. So I don't know all of the people on this webinar, but, there are the academic jobs where you're teaching in a community site where emergency medicine residents rotate. And there's not a lot of requirement around scholarship or anything like that. And those are really important academic positions. We want our residents to be exposed to great clinicians in various settings, right? And then there's the other pendulum. All the way over here is the academic job that is either the physician scientist or the APD or the PD. And then there's a bunch in between. So I guess what I would say to that is, first of all, it depends on what you're looking for in an academic job. And so for the people on this webinar, I would say really do some self-discovery and sort of self-evaluation as to what you want to emphasize in your academic job and then target those. If you want to be a program director or a medical director at an academic site in particular, or, I think you asked, those are the main ones you've asked, or I would say, to be honest with you, you do need a fellowship at this point, at least at our shop. I can only speak for that. Or there is an alternative. You're coming with a lot of experience. You've already done a whole lot of operations. You've been an assistant medical director somewhere else, and you rose to those positions without a fellowship, but through your engagement in the institution. Then I would say we are at the point where, it's either experience and a lot of it, or it's a fellowship. I have a bias and think, for specific areas and for specific positions and academic positions, a fellowship is needed, but it isn't for anyone. And I would say if you don't have a passion for an area of focus, whether it's education or addiction medicine or medical toxicology or critical care or administration or research, if you don't have a passion, I never recommend that somebody does a fellowship for the sake of a fellowship. So I would leave it at that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Susan. I think that those are really great points. Speaking back to, we were first talking about with authenticity and why you're doing things, fellowships have opportunity costs, right? You can go right out of residency and go into a job that's not academic. So if you are spending more time educating yourself, there is a cost to that. And so if you don't love it and you don't have a specific, 5 or 10-year goal, it might not be for you. But if you really love whatever field you're doing your fellowship in emergency medicine, it can really help to elevate your career quickly. And it shows that you have that dedication. You're willing to spend that time and become an expert. And I think being able to talk to the why you did it, and then talk about the value that it will bring with this extra time that you spent learning your specific skill can be really huge. Another thing I found successful is once people do fellowships, they can come back and, teach the residents in a specific area or establish another fellowship, at a different institution. So there is a bunch of value to that for sure. But I think that it will definitely come through. If you're just doing it to check the box, that's not the right answer.
And I'll put in a plug for doing fellowships if I can, or doing something else that enhances your career. Having run a fellowship for 19 years, in medical toxicology, I could tell you that even though many of my fellows started out doing emergency medicine and a touch of medical toxicology, many of them moved on to other positions in institutions, medical schools, other places. So it is a great way to launch a career. It provides you a certain set of skills that you wouldn't otherwise have. And if you kind of grossly divide fellowships into those that provide, for lack of a better term, hard skills and soft skills, you'll probably never become a medical toxicologist without doing a fellowship. But you can become a program director without doing a med ed fellowship. So if I kind of break them down that way, it helps a little bit. You can definitely pick up enough skills through, academic faculty involvement to become a program director or even a medical director of an ED without doing a fellowship. But if all other things are equal and I'm looking to hire somebody who, again, are otherwise equally qualified, clearly the person with the fellowship is going to have the upper hand. But I do think that fellowships in academics as a specialty of breadth, they do provide a certain amount of depth that many people, as I do, really appreciate about our specialty. So many people like to do fellowships for that reason, but I do believe that they give you a certain amount of credibility, as would be getting an MBA or an MPH or something else. It just gives you a little differentiation from others and gives you a little credibility outside of the ED.
Thank you so much. So it
Can
kind of
I
seems like,
add some,
oh,
sorry,
of
can
course,
I
Dr.
comment again?
Stern.
I don't want anybody to miss, I don't want anybody to think that I agree with everything Lewis just said. When I say it's not for everybody, it's if you're not passionate about a topic, I'm not sure it is the right thing for you. You're not going to, what everything Lewis said though is absolutely correct. It does make you stand out. There are many, in fact, I wrote an old editorial. It's a long time ago in academic emergency medicine. You can look it up. I don't know if you can even still get it online about the benefits of fellowship. The benefits of fellowship are many, in particular if you have an area of passion. And some of them are the fact that, you know, whether it's a 1 year or 2 year fellowship, that institution where you're doing the fellowship, that department now has an obligation to mentor you and to develop you and wrap their arms around you just like they would all of their other trainees. It provides time for you to develop those skills, whatever they will be, and study something in depth. And there's no question, if you're looking, you know, I think, Lewis, you stopped short of saying this. Many people, you know, by having a second interest, not just clinical care in emergency medicine, that, you know, probably creates some longevity and wellness for many people. So there are many advantages. And, you know, I'd love to send you to this article, not because I wrote it, but because it really outlines the many advantages. And the other thing is, I can't remember the author who said this, I think it was Blackburn, but for people that go into academics, but even clinical medicine, the new faculty member, the junior faculty member's worst enemy is themselves. And this gets to one of the questions that I think you're going to ask, because they say yes to everybody, they're not focused, etc. When you're in a fellowship, it gives you an immediate group of collaborators and mentors and a community of scholars or like-minded individuals that you share an interest, a passion with. Those are the advantages of a fellowship. And so I encourage anyone who has that interest to do it. And so I'm agreeing with you, Lewis. I'm not saying poo-poo to fellowships, but you don't need it for everything. And if you're not passionate about something, I'm not sure it makes sense to do it.
I appreciate everybody's response. I think that if I were to summarize, it would pretty much be what Dr. Stern just said, is that it seems like fellowship can be beneficial in a number of different ways. But if it's not something that you have passion in, then it is maybe not the best choice to pursue one if you have zero interest in really doing it just for a faculty position. Again, I thank you everybody for your responses.
So I think a few of you touched on this in our fellowship discussion, but in terms of ways to demonstrate your passion about an area or your expertise, we have a lot of applicants who have some non-traditional academic portfolios, maybe having pretty robust endeavors in FOMED, community engagement, or quality improvement work. And so we're curious how, and we'll open this up, but how do you approach looking at items like that in a portfolio? And moreover, when a lot of this can't be recognized by things like academic publications, how do you recommend that applicants showcase some of this work when they're applying for these positions?
I can go ahead and start. I'd say I'd be interested in it. I think emergency medicine has been at the forefront of some of these less traditional ways to build your academic career. How do you demonstrate it? I think it would be helpful, because you can give one example. Like, you're a regular contributor to EM Wrap. That's relatively substantial. What's the audience there? If you can quantify that touch base with the work that you're doing, I think that's a helpful way to communicate that, as opposed to, for instance, I wrote an online book chapter for a small interest group in one of our societies. That's not at the same level as what the other example I just gave a second ago. So I think it's something that can be helpful, but I would also not lose sight of the fact that I think a powerful piece of currency in academic emergency medicine is still peer-reviewed publications. And so I think a discussion in the interview, when I get beyond my interest in that, would be, how do we, or how do I as a chair, and what is your interest in moving this from something in that venue to more of the peer-reviewed publication venue as you begin in this position? Because ultimately, we've encountered this in our department. Again, it's the currency for promotion and tenure, and your promotion and tenure committee in your institution will not be just emergency medicine. It'll be physicians and basic scientists, from all specialties and departments in your university or school?
I'll jump on. Learn when you're looking at the job, look at the criteria on the academic track that you've chosen or are assigned to, because there are institutions that look at things that FOAM for example, won't really qualify for. They want publication, they want grants, they want things that are fair. And others look for softer things like national reputation. And they all look for them both in various ways. But an academic reputation doesn't necessarily have to have a lot of publication. To the MRAP example, or if you're on an editorial board of a journal, or you're involved with SAEM at a deeper level as a committee chair or something like that, these things do count. And they're not necessarily traditional in the sense of being a publication. Most institutions are definitely revisiting their criteria and are trying to soften them. I think the old idea that you needed an R01 to get promoted is largely gone unless you're on a tenured track or a research track. Most of us are on clinical educator tracks or some equivalent, or clinician tracks or some equivalent, where the criteria are much softer. So these things, these community engagement activities, you get a letter when you're going up for promotion, and it's very helpful. And don't forget, promotion is not the only metric, although it's probably the most relevant one, because most of us, I think, as academic credibility is linked to promotion. But many departments want visibility for the department, and you'll get that through the FOAM non-traditional routes, which do bring value to the department. Maybe not necessarily they'll directly enhance your promotability, but I think departments like that, it certainly helps to attract good residents, good faculty. It grows collaborative relations with other institutions. So I think that those are valuable in that sense, even though they may not get you promoted per se.
Thank you both so much. It sounds like it's, to briefly summarize, it's pretty critical to think about how do you quantify some of this value so that even folks who are not as well versed in that particular area can recognize the importance of that to the specialty and the significance of those contributions. And moreover, to Dr. Nelson's point, really thinking about how do those contributions fit into the roles that you are applying for or the promotion criteria that you're seeking, and thinking about the tracks within that and whether those are aligned to the departmental goals. I want to pivot a little bit back to the question that Dr. Stern alluded to around, once you have a faculty member who has joined your institution and is quite excited about all of the different opportunities that exist there, how do you recommend they balance saying yes to every opportunity and looking at folks like that versus people who might be more focused on their own specific interests and priorities? And, to say it differently, how do you recommend that junior faculty say no respectfully to commitments? We can open that up to whoever has.
Yeah, I can start with that for sure. So I think that when you are a junior faculty member, unless you have a really specific niche, you should try to say yes to some things, because there are so many ways to get engaged that maybe are surprising to people. I notice that people tend to go through their medical school, their residency, that it's like a very set period of time for each of those things. And then they become faculty, and sometimes they don't have that continued direction. And it takes things like getting involved with maybe CQI or operations or, some other committee, both in the department or in the medical school or whatever the structure looks like at your institution, to start to make connections and to build relationships and to find out what you as a junior faculty person really likes and how you can contribute. I have so many success stories of this where I've had a position come up and somebody was like, I want to be an APD. I want to be an APD. And I'm like, listen, I don't have an APD position right now, but I have this medical student clerkship director position, right? And this person was like, fine, I'll do it. And now love it and are thriving at it. And this is their career path, And I think that if this person were coached to say no, they would never have gotten to this place where they're truly thriving, right? So I think that you should say yes a lot as a junior faculty member. I do think balance is important. So, if you say yes to every single thing, you're not going to do anything well. But in your first little bit of time, just because you say yes to something doesn't mean you have to do it for 10 years either. So it's a great way to get involved, to start to learn what else is out there in your department, in the institution, and to start to become kind of immersed into the system and the culture. So I would certainly err on the side of saying yes, especially up front, until you really have a specific path that you are fostering And conversations with your chair and other mentors can help you with that path. But first, you have to be involved and engaged.
I would completely agree. I think sometimes, we want to be mindful of workload and work-life balance. And I think I hear more of here's my list of 5 things, and then I'm going to say no. I got the exact same advice Dr. Tansky mentioned early on when I was a resident, knowing that I was going to take a faculty position. And I think you'd be surprised sometimes the doors that opens for you or the interests that you might not have known that you had. I got very involved in QI and still am to this day because of that. The only other thing I'll add is I think some of the onus of helping with no is on me as a chair, especially if you're a brand new junior faculty member. That's part of my faculty development plan with you and frequent check-ins to make sure that we're not overextending in areas and getting beyond the position description and the responsibilities.
And I'll jump on the say yes bandwagon because I think it's very important. Certainly, to Mary's point, you don't know you're not going to like something till you try it. If you try it and you don't like it, it's something as a chair I should be able to get you out of. But I do think you should try it. If you really don't want to do something, be super respectful in your response. You better have a pretty good reason, I think, to not do something. Most of the time, the chair, whoever is asking to do something, isn't doing it in a vindictive way. They're doing it because the job they need. They've chosen you from probably a handful of people who had the opportunity to do it, and I would take it on. And the one other thing I would say is that's not a time to bargain for something in return, in my mind. Right. That's not when you say, I'll do it, but I want to shift a week off. That's something when you're good at it and you've done a really good job and you want to go back and ask for something. But when somebody gives you unless it's some tremendous task, they want you to be the residency program director or something. But most of these things are one-offs that they're just trying to get you to do. Pick up a meeting that's an hour a week or something like that. I think that's not the time to ask for anything in return.
And I guess I'll just jump in on and say yes, but. So I agree with everything Liz just said. Most and what James and Mary said, which is when the chair is asking you to do something, it's not just because they need it done. Yes, they need it done, but they probably selected you because they see something in you that matches that, or they sense that this might be, for some reason, they're thinking this might be a good opportunity for you. So I would keep that in mind, right? It's kind of, I don't want to say an honor, but it's a compliment when they ask you to do something. Doesn't mean you should say yes to everything. And I think this goes to Mary's point and the others is when you come in and you're pretty much, as we say, undifferentiated, that's the time to do that self-exploration and self-discovery, and figure out what you want. You should be working towards finding a focus, because if you're not focused for most of your career, I mean, it's okay, but it just makes it harder on you because you're trying to do multiple things. Once you find your focus, that's when you may want to say no, because you need to advance in that way. And the meetings, the committees, the projects you take on should be focused somewhat in that area. And so I would say, as a junior faculty, it's sort of different stages. And when you're undifferentiated, if you're at a place where we provide a mentorship team, or at least we try to, but it can be your chair, it can be your mentor who can help you say no and make sure that you're balanced. You should be, it is really hard to do, even at my stage. You should be thinking about 5 years ahead of you and thinking, what are my 5-year goals? And what do I need to do year 1, year 2, year 3 to get there? And you should be doing that with a mentor. So when you're in these interviews, you should be asking, what kind of mentorship program do you have? And that will help you guide your decisions about what you say yes and no to. And your mentor, like I said, if you have a mentor, they should help you, when it's appropriate, say no and help you do that in a way that's appropriate. And sometimes they might be the one that reaches out and says, hey, thanks for reaching out for this individual. I don't think it'd be a good time for them or whatever, but they can help you say no. And then the other thing is, if you are focused, you have your focus, and somebody asks you to do something like write a book chapter. Let's say you're focused on, I don't know, something in QA, and they ask you to write a book chapter around, renal injury or something like that. Is there a way where you can fulfill what they want to do, but make it similar to what you're doing and find the common ground? So it's a win-win.
Yeah, some of those discussions are actually my most fun discussions with faculty. So at the end of the year, we do reviews twice a year. We have a check-in mid-year, and at the end of the year, we do a review. And I call it Marie Kondoing the plate. So basically, people tend to pile all these things on for a year, or 2 years, 3 years, whatever the case may be. And as they're moving on in the progression through their career, you have to move some things off the plate to be able to put important things on the plate. And so I tend to see people that have had, said yes and have had some successes really take these projects or these committees as their babies and they want to keep holding on to them. And it is such a good conversation to be able to say, okay, you can still say peripherally involved, but why don't you delegate this or do X, Y, or Z to move it off your plate. So then you're in a supervisory role, right? Or maybe then you work to help get it published, or you bring another institution on board or something. So it's a way to hold whatever it is you're doing, see what value it brought you, how it can continue to bring you joy and value in your career. And if it doesn't, move it on to somebody else because it's another opportunity for somebody to thrive in that role. So I love those conversations. I think they can be really fun.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights on that question. And, it transitions well to the next question we have around when is the right time to have some of these conversations about balance and things like shift buy down or protected time, as people have often both clinical and extra clinical interests. And it would be helpful if you could touch on how to navigate that as an applicant looking for that first academic role, and then how to continue that conversation once you've been in some of these roles as you're navigating promotion or maybe saying no respectfully to certain tasks that you take on in the future. We'll open this one up as well.
Well, I'll start, I guess, go back to what I said earlier, and I think someone else mentioned it also. Every place is going to be different on how they structure these things, but I make it a point during our interview, I set aside time to basically go through the job description line by line, and the hours are laid out in there. And I think sometimes a 1.0 FTE, which would be maybe considered full-time, some places consider zero point 0.8 full-time, and then how that translates into your percentages for what we call service is your clinical time, and then research and teaching. That's going to look different for every position, but it can help kind of lay the groundwork on, what a 40-hour work week might look like, or, what a month may appear on your schedule. But generally speaking, I'd say for us in our institution, that's pretty established for that position that you're applying for. So, and especially for a new faculty job, there's not a lot of negotiation there or wiggle room at our institution, unless there might be something else. This would probably get funding along with you. I think that's where we might be able to work some adjustments into those initial conversations.
Yeah, and just to follow up with a question to you, are you talking about at the beginning when you're first taking the job, or in the course of the first decade or so of your career? When do you go back and negotiate these things? Because I know the answer was very much addressed, I think, at the inception, which, there was a good
Yeah,
answer.
yeah, and thanks, Dr. Waymack, for commenting on the inception point. The question was both, so I imagine that how you approach those conversations does change depending on how you've already demonstrated your commitment and importance to the department. So it would be helpful to have your thoughts on how that does shift over time as you're on this path.
I think for us, it kind of flows like as Dr. Tansky was saying, as you have those yearly check-ins, and then as Dr. Stern mentioned, what's your 5-year goal? And then how do we get there at years 1, 2, and 3? And I think we can have an ongoing conversation. If that's our target, what do we need that buy down time for? What are we going to do with that time? And then how do I, as a chair, help facilitate or support that buy down so we can get to that endpoint for, mid-career or later career conversations?
Okay, I'll comment. So, yeah, I think that's a great answer. One of the things that people tend to think in academic medicine is that their shifts are their full job, and that just isn't the case. I had alluded earlier to the fact that this is a career. This isn't something where you check in and check out. Typically, academic requirements for clinical work are slightly lower than community work, not always, but a lot of times they are. And so, if you're working 12 or 13 shifts a month as your clinical work, there are expectations beyond that. So, at OHSU, we have time profiles. And so everybody puts the number of clinical shifts that they work, as well as what they're doing with the other time to get you up to like a 40-hour work week, for example, like you mentioned. And so when you actually put it on paper, you see that there is a lot of extra time that you can be doing things. Conference is a really good example, right? Conference attendance is typically 4 hours. And if you were to look at that in terms of FTE or number of hours that it actually takes, that is not a full day to attend conference, right? It's 4 hours. So really, if you attend conference for 2 weeks in a row, that would be 8 hours or one working day, right? So there's just all of these things that when you really pencil them out, there tends to be a lot more time available in a work week than people really realize. And so the conversation I have with people when I'm recruiting and interviewing them is to really be intentional with that time, do things like put blocks of time on your calendar and treat them like shifts where you're doing administrative work or you're doing teaching or you're going to conference, and to start being a little bit more intentional about how you schedule yourself. Because when you do that, you realize that there is a lot more, many more hours in the day than just working your clinical shifts and kind of checking in and checking out. And then once you start to exceed that, right? So if you're doing ultrasound review and you're spending 40 hours doing ultrasound review or something, then that would be a great time to have a conversation to say, here's the value that I'm bringing. Because of my review, we're now billing for these many ultrasounds. Those kind of conversations where you're demonstrating that value and you're being proactive about it, as opposed to going into a conversation and say, hey, I'm going to do this, but I need, 2 shifts a month off. Like that tends to be, those conversations don't tend to go great, because we need to see that you're committed and that you're really bringing that value and expertise to the department.
Yeah, and I'll give a related answer, which maybe puts it a little bit more in terms of dollars and cents. And is a sad truth, but a harsh reality that for you to have non-clinical time costs me money, right? Because I am expected to cover an ED for a certain amount of time. And if you're not doing it, somebody else has to, right? So it depends on where you are, but I would say is a general gauge to buy somebody down by about 4 hours or half a shift, if you do 8 hour shifts, probably costs in the range of about $50,000 a year, something in that general range. So you have to say that what I'm getting back is $50,000 and I have to be able to show something for it. We do pay for clinical time more than we pay for academic time. So I usually use as a metric, and others might disagree. But if you're getting a 4 hour buy down, I expect 8 hours of work to come back from you, right? Some might do less, some might do more. But the truth is that most people's protected time doesn't bring in money. It brings in lots of other good. And I'm not suggesting, listen, my whole career has been built around this. But people have to realize that there is a cost. And one thing we do in emergency medicine is value our time. I can tell you, I can count on one hand the number of people that have ever made an appointment to come and see me to ask for more money, right? But I could tell you I need 25 hands to count the number of times people came in to ask for reduced hours. Right. And I will just tell you from a chair's perspective, they are exactly the same thing. Right. And you may not see it that way. And you value your time and you should have your time and you should make good with your time. But what I don't like to hear was when people say, you know, I'm working too hard and I need more protected time. Tell me what you're doing. Give me a good reason. Show me some deliverables. Let's negotiate. And if you need it and you quote unquote deserve it, I am obviously happy to give it to you, right? If it's something that the department wants and needs and it benefits us, yes, I care if it benefits you too, but I have a department to run. So that's just the harsh reality of how we live. It's not, we don't have unlimited supplies of protected time to give to people. And it's only getting harder. I would just warn you, it's not getting easier.
One thing I would add is exactly, I agree with everything everyone said. The other thing is it has to be equitable, right? So most departments or many departments will have set, this is what this amount of 0.1 FTE equals this many shifts, et cetera, and what they give buy down for, right? So there cannot be even a perception of inequity for someone getting buy down for doing something, but well, you're not valuing what another faculty member saying, well, I don't get buy downs. Does that mean you don't value me or what I'm doing? So you also have to be very careful around that. And most departments are clear around that as well.
I want to thank everyone for their response. I know this is somewhat of a hot topic, if you will, regarding, buy down and reduced shift work, amongst people applying. I'm sure that it's a big portion of what they're thinking about, but Yeah, I really do appreciate everyone's thoughts. So I just want to, for the sake of time, we have about 5 minutes left to the webinar. We do have a question in the chat, and I'll read it out and open it up to the floor for anyone that has to comment. How do your departments work with physicians who have significant others in medicine? And what advice do you have regarding balancing two academic careers?
So what I would say is more and this is happening more and more. We're finding, there's more and more dual recruits, things like that. I guess what I would say, and I'm not part of a couple at all. So I can't say that I'm talking about this from a personal experience, except for my observations and role as a chair, I guess. So take it with a grain of salt. We try everything has, like, I'm going to go back to the word equitable. I can't do something special for someone and not do it for someone else because they're single or their significant other isn't in medicine, right? So what we try and do with our scheduling and with things like that is, first of all, it always has to be equitable. It should be transparent. And we try and build in as much flexibility and tools within the system so that everybody can access those same tools and that same flexibility to work within their personal situation. What do I mean by that? I don't, there are different ways, different people use different scheduling programs. We use something called shift admin. That means everybody gets a certain number of, it's almost like a token to block things off, but everybody has to have the same token and they know the process and they then can coordinate with their significant other as best they can. And I think, we give flexibility if somebody wants to flex their FTE up or down, meaning, oh, my significant other is having, they're going to be really busy and we're not going to have time with the kids or something. So for this quarter, I might want to reduce my FTE by 10%. You get paid a little less, but I allow that. So I try to build flexibility in, but it has to be offered to everyone and in the same way. So for me, it's how do I, as the chair, make sure that we have enough levers to pull or as many as we can to allow people some of that. I don't have a better answer than that.
Yeah, what has worked for us, and not even just two academic careers, but two very busy careers with somebody in EM, right? A lot of times we'll try to allow people who want to work less desirable shifts to have more say over their schedule. So we have a physician scheduler and we don't let anybody pick their schedule, including me. We put our same requests in, our number of requests that we have. And if people choose to be a nocturnist, which tend to be the least desirable shifts, they have a little bit more say. So they get adjusted up a bit in terms of what say they have over the schedule. That might not sound amazing. However, it can be really good for people that need that flexibility because it just gives them a little bit more control. So that's been one other opportunity that we've used. And I think, again, just the transparency piece, as long as people know what the process is and how they can be eligible for what their shifts look like or their requests or how many weekends or whatever the case may be is very important because you don't want to be having any trust issues or giving people deals that other people don't have access to also. So it's tricky. And I think you can see by all of our pause that there's like no great answer, but it's life. Life is tricky. It's hard to build in schedules around shift work. That's just the reality. And I think all the departments do the best that they can to make it work for their faculty.
Yeah, and I know we're done, but Sue, you said it way better than I would have said it, but I generally agree. And I've actually had faculty who don't have children complain to me that the faculty with children have have an unfair advantage. And I'm very sensitive to that. And I do think we have to be absolutely fair to everybody. We all have different, models that we use to run our life, but we all deserve the same sorts of treatment for the same job that we're doing. So I think it is, to use your word, Mary, tricky.
Thank you all
I want
for joining us for this webinar and sharing your insights. It's been incredible to have four such leaders of emergency medicine here being vulnerable and talking about such a hot topic right now. Thank you again. This is recorded for anyone who wants to revisit all of these answers. And I don't think I'm alone in saying that anyone in emergency medicine would be lucky to work in any of your departments. So thanks for spending your time with us today.
Yep, we really appreciate you guys taking the time and giving some insights into people in the Zoom as well as those being recorded. So again, thank you all so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, thank you.